Good day to all of the Fantasy Flyer followers. My name is Derek here with another episode of the Fantasy Flyer. You may notice that I am by myself. I'm floating in the ether all alone, and that's okay. My man Taylor had to take care of some stuff, wasn't quite feeling up to it. I don't think his voice was 100%. I don't think he was really able to do the podcast. So I am sending well wishes to Taylor. But we are here with another episode of the Fantasy Flyer. I appreciate all of you for following in, joining. We have gotten some feedback, and it seems like, from what we've heard, people like what we're doing. So if you like the show, please subscribe on YouTube. There's also Apple Podcasts, Facebook.com/the Fantasy Flyer Guys. Just like you'd spell it, there's no super special Z or hyphens or extra ones where they don't need to be. It's just that. Give the Facebook page a like, where you can catch injury updates, fantasy updates. You can catch our security check, where we apply a lot of stats and thought to certain opinions going around the league. So we just want to put that out there. We appreciate all of the feedback, and on behalf of Taylor, we thank all of you. So real quick, we'll start off this episode. It's probably going to be a little bit quicker than normal because I am talking to a computer and eventually talking to you when you listen. So we're going to start off with the Thursday night review. If you tuned in to the Colts and Broncos game, you wasted 3 hours of your life. I'm so sorry. That seems to be the general consensus of that game. And it doesn't seem, I don't think I've seen one person who says that that's a good game. So it looked like there was some atrocious football played all around. There was 4 interceptions between Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan. There's 0 touchdowns scored in the entire game. Somehow this game managed to went into overtime, which was only even more painful. Amazon did like their best to make sure they caught everybody leaving the stadium versus during overtime. Excuse me. So it just wasn't fun to watch. It wasn't fun for those in the stadium. I would have been very angry if I spent $200 on a ticket and I had to watch that game. I know you can't control it, but that really bites. So, sending my condolences out. Um, the Colts' offensive line was very bad, as it has been all year. But Denver's offensive line was also kind of performing poorly. They both have some rookies on them. So, I know that both defenses targeted, especially the Broncos defense, kind of targeted. I believe it's Raimuth, Raimuth, Raymond, on the Colts offensive line. I saw that for the 6 minutes that I could bear to watch this football game. Some of the receivers were fine, especially in the fantasy realm. I know Alec Pierce I played, and he had 8 catches for 81 yards, and if he had gotten a touchdown, it would have been absolutely wonderful for a rookie in his 5th week. But if you avoided this game in a fantasy capacity, you are very happy. A lot of folks around Naheem Hines. He left in the first quarter with a concussion, so okay. Like now we got to go to Philip Lindsay, who was called up yesterday, and Deion Jackson, who's played all of 2 snaps in 4 games. But the good news for the Colts is they end up winning this game 12-9 because the Broncos looked absolutely horrible. Russell Wilson looks atrocious. He cannot complete anything in the red zone, which was very evident on the 4th and 5 play that he didn't win the game with. So the Colts, I think, are being 2-2-1. I think that's kind of like roughly where they should be. I think going into the season, obviously the tie could go either way, and nobody would really be surprised with the Colts record through 5 games. But I feel like the Broncos' expectations were so high that being 2-3 really is like it might as well be 0-5. Like I just feel like that's where the consensus is for most folks, especially Broncos fans who are fed up. I mean, they've won 2 games on a poor Houston Texans offense that's learning and growing, and Jimmy G stepping out of the back of the end zone. So I don't think there's much to be happy about if you're a Broncos fan, and I'm sorry to say that. So, yeah, at 4th and 5, the pass specifically, obviously KJ Hamler was open, which is something else that I saw all over Twitter and all over Facebook. Wide open, like first step back from Russell Wilson. You could have seen him. Obviously, it wasn't in his progressions at that time, but it also kind of highlights the 0-2 when going for it. Like the Broncos have gone for it twice this year now, and they are 0-2 in those games. The other one being week 1 versus the Seahawks. And now Nathaniel Hackett kind of goes for this. We're going to throw on 4th and 5. They didn't convert on 2nd and short. They didn't convert on 3rd and short. They didn't convert on 4th and short in the red zone against the Colts with 3 minutes to go in overtime. So they go for it on 4th, and it doesn't work out. So Broncos, unfortunately, will be back in prime time next Monday night against the Chargers. I think that's it's week 6, and they've been in prime time either Thursday, Sunday, or Monday night games 4 of the weeks through the first 6 weeks. So I would not be surprised if Monday Night Football lost 5 million viewers with the performance last night by the Broncos. I feel like a lot of people won't turn in now. And I want to say this to the league, that you hyped up the Broncos, but they probably shouldn't be on that many primetime games when you don't know how the team's going to go. Just my...
Stop it. Get some help.
Just my point of view. So the Colts did average, I think. Matt Ryan threw 2 interceptions, which is where he's been. He fumbled once or twice. He threw the ball to Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce, and everybody else was kind of struggling to perform otherwise, and he couldn't find any time in the pocket to throw. So that's been the story of the Colts all year. So not super anxious to watch any Broncos game until Russell Wilson starts playing like the Russell Wilson we knew in Seattle. And I'm sure if he heard that, he would be probably pretty angry, but it is what it is. I'm sorry, Russell. It's not going too well. So that was the Thursday Night Football review. Again, my condolences goes out to anyone who watched that entire game. I think Robert Griffin III tweeted earlier today that for watching that football game, everyone should get a month of Amazon Prime, and I want someone to start that petition. So moving forward, I'm going to go into the 9 segment really quick, our news, injury notes, etc. For Atlanta, Kyle Pitts is out this week, so Parker Hess, fire him up, and I'll get more to that in a little bit. For Baltimore, Rashad Bateman is out with a foot injury. I say Mark Andrews, Devin Duvernay, probably. Buffalo, Dawson Knox will be out, as Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie are both questionable. I would imagine Gabe Davis is probably going to play. I didn't see an injury designation next to his Q tag. Isaiah McKenzie is coming back from the concussion, more likely to miss. Jamison Crowder is also out with a broken ankle, and he will probably be shelved for a little bit. I'm surprised he's not on IR right now because he broke his ankle, but I'm not a doctor. I don't make the team decisions. I just quote and comment on them. For Dallas, CD Lamb has a groin injury, which I believe he picked up. I don't think that was in the game last Sunday. I believe that was the first day of practice on Tuesday. He picked up that groin injury. He is questionable. He was a limited participant in Friday's practice. Tony Pollard has also come down with an illness as the week has gone on. He did not practice on Friday. For Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds are both questionable. Amon-Ra St. Brown coming back with the ankle injury. If Amon-Ra doesn't play and Josh Reynolds does, fire up Josh Reynolds. If neither of them play, Quintez Cephas is also out, so it gets a little ugly. Khalif Raymond becomes really kind of like probably a high-quality streaming option, so I will go into the 5 fantasy flyers for me next. I don't know. It'll be this segment, and we'll touch on that just a little bit. DeAndre Swift is out for Detroit, so Jamal Williams will come right back into the fold. Cincinnati, Hayden Hurst has a groin injury and is questionable. He did not practice on Friday, so I don't know. That's not really a good sign for someone who's been a very steady tight end option. T. Higgins has an ankle injury. He is questionable. He was practiced in a limited capacity on Friday. For Houston, the Texans, Brevin Jordan and Chris Moore are out. Brevin Jordan, the tight end, Chris Moore, the wide receiver. Just means more reps for Nico Collins, O.J. Howard, and Jordan Akins. I wouldn't go crazy about the Houston offense enough to really go out of my way to get them. Jacksonville, Zay Jones is questionable with an ankle injury. 8 to 10 targets available there if he doesn't play. So that brings Marvin Jones and Evan Ingram up a hair, I imagine. I don't think Christian Kirk can see more than the 9 to 10 he's averaging now without it being kind of a giveaway. But, he might see an extra 1 or 2. For the Chargers, Keenan Allen is out yet again. speedy recovery to him. I don't know what injury. I didn't see an injury designation for him, but it's got to be something somewhat serious. Josh Palmer has an ankle injury. He is questionable. Full participant in Friday practice, so I imagine that he will probably play. For the Las Vegas Raiders, Hunter Renfrow practiced fully on Friday. There's no official designation given because it's a Monday night game versus the Chiefs, but it is trending like he's going to make his return, and that means the end of the Mac Hollins days, at least trustworthy Mac Hollins days where you're not completely touchdown dependent. For Miami, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are both questionable. Tyreek Hill has a quad injury. Jalen Waddle with a groin. No indication on whether they will or won't play. I believe they both were limited in practice today. For New England, Brian Hoyer was put on the injured reserve, which means Bailey Zappi will start for the foreseeable future. It sounds absolutely atrocious, but when they face off against the last-ranked defense in the Detroit Lions, I'm not as scared as some people probably are. Also, Jacoby Myers, limited in practice today. He has a Q tag for Sunday. Jonnu Smith is doubtful with an ankle injury. On to the Saints. Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston will not play. Michael Thomas will sit for a foot injury that didn't seem that serious 2 weeks ago, and he's going to miss his second straight game. Jameis Winston, after the Andy Dalton performance, I'm not surprised that they went back to Andy Dalton, let him heal up from his fractures in his back. Alvin Kamara is in and will play this week. For the Giants, Daniel Jones will play. That was announced today. Tyrod Taylor is out, which means that David Webb is the backup, so hopefully Daniel Jones does not sustain any other injuries. That game, of course, is in London, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Hawaiian. Kenny Golladay is out versus Green Bay as well as Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson. I can't imagine anybody has them left on their team, but if you have either of them on your bench, specifically Toney, Galladay probably should have been gone from your bench like 2 weeks ago, but just drop them. Make space. Do something else. I don't know why they even pretend to practice during the week, and they say they're limited, and then they get a Q tag on Wednesday just to be out on Friday. So, for the Jets, the Zach Wilson experiment. I shouldn't say Zach Wilson experiment. That's bad. That's incorrect. Wrong. The Zach Wilson return. He is questionable, and so is Breece Hall, but they're both non-injury related. I don't see any injury tags next to him, so I would imagine they're both going to play. Breece Hall trending upward. Zach Wilson on his way back. Going to shake off a little bit more of the rust. Seattle Seahawks, Kenneth Walker is questionable with a shoulder injury. For Tampa Bay, Cameron Brate is out versus Atlanta. Julio Jones is questionable. For the Titans, Treylon Burks is out, which means a small bump up to just about everybody. Robert Woods mainly, Nick Westbrook-Akina, Kyle Phillips if he plays. I didn't see a Q tag for him, so I imagine he's playing. And finally, for the Washington Commanders, John Dotson is out. He is tied for the league lead in touchdowns with 4 apiece with Stephon Diggs, so that hurts. Logan Thomas has a Q tag. So that is it for our 9 segment. Andy Isabella was signed by the Ravens as well, which is a small note. That happened yesterday. I imagine they knew that Rashad Bateman was going to be out, but I don't think he'll play this week anyway, so not a huge deal there. Moving on, we're going to go on to the Week 5 slate. I'm going to try and make these as entertaining as I possibly can without me just talking at you at a computer. The Giants, 3-1, are traveling to London with the Green Bay Packers. Both teams are 3-1. Again, they're really early game on Sunday, so make sure your lineups are set Saturday night. Daniel Jones and Saquon's rushing ability has been very good. This is the number 1 ranked rush offense that the Giants have. Green Bay's defense, however, has been extremely solid against the rush. So this will be an interesting kind of head matchup. They'll take each other head on. Their big question, like we just went through our 9 segment, who's going to catch for the Giants? I mean, they have a thin wide receiver core. The only one that comes to mind that I may trust would be Darius Slayton. He does have the most experience in the offense compared to the available wide receivers. David Sills would probably be my second guess. So I would take a shot on Darius Slayton in some tournament plays. I think for cash game, it's best to just stay away from this side of the football. I would much rather go with like Romeo Dobbs or Alan Lazard and spend up a little bit. Um, I could, however, see David Bellinger taking on an extended pass catching role. So he has been indeed very serviceable the last, I'd say, 2 to 3 weeks. Um, Aaron Rodgers is 4-1 in his career against the Giants. I don't think that would change this week. The Packers seem like a better team. I mean, they both seem actually statistically on paper, they both seem extremely similar, but I would imagine the Packers just have a little bit of flexibility to move up and down the field. Rodgers has averaged 298 yards and 3 touchdowns in those 5 games versus the Giants. And of recent, Romeo Dobbs has been the go-to. Rodgers said yesterday he wants to air it out more frequently, and Alan Lazard has some speed to do that. Dobbs has been trustworthy, so I would be intrigued to see if that starts this week in London at Toppenheimer, not Tops Bottom, Topper London Stadium, whatever the name is. So sorry about that one. That's not my. I don't know what name. I don't know what kind of name it is. Aaron Jones and Saquon will also be an enticing matchup on the ground. Saquon is the league leader in rushing yards by a whopping 4 yards over Nick Chubb. I feel like Green Bay still being the league leader in well, I guess failed completions, failed third down attempts. That's probably the correct words. Those are probably some correct words. Saquon's pass catching may be able to help alleviate some of that pressure because this isn't exactly an offensive line that would probably stop any of the third down advances. I would start Darius Slayton here, and I'm going to sit Daniel Jones actually because I feel like, especially the third downs, he may not get a whole heck of a lot of offensive opportunity. And when he does, it's going to be at those third down times when you need him to convert. And that's a toss-up. So stop with that. Yeah, the Packers are still leading. They're still leading in third down conversion percentage as far as the defense goes. So I'm taking the Packers on this one. Real quick, I will go to the over-under for the NFL games because I did not add that in. So real quick, I'll give you the over-under on it. Apologies. Looks like oh wow. Okay. The Giants are 7.5 point dogs. So the Packers 7.5 point favorites, in other words. So I don't have an over under though. 41. So I would probably take the under on that. The Packers, I don't think are going to need to score much, but that is my take on that. Moving along. Again, give the video a like. I'm rolling by myself. Leave some comments. If I'm boring, that's fine. Perfectly fine. I don't like doing this show by myself. I miss Taylor, but it'll be okay. We'll move along as the fantasy flyer goes. We fly from the hip. We said it in episode 1. We're flying from the hip. Game 2, Steelers 1-3 at the Bills 3-1. This one is in Buffalo. Over under at 45.5. I would imagine this is still probably a 2-touchdown favor for the Bills. Yeah, they're favored by 14 points. If you want to win money, that's probably somebody you're going to add to your parlay. Just being honest with you. So, Bills, however, they are good. Let's just talk about that. This is a full game debut of Kenny Pickett. It's going to be interesting to see how the offense looks in its entirety. He kind of helped George Pickens get to his first 100-yard game last week. I mean, Trubisky had a hand in that, but if he can limit turnovers, it makes this a much more interesting game, and I think that's where it starts. I kind of see this as the start of the Pickens rise. Not to say that this will be a good game for them because Buffalo is the number 1 rated defense. Actually, it's number 3 rated defense. 49ers are number 1 rated. Pittsburgh defense is good, but Buffalo offense is better. So swinging around to the other side, Josh Allen will be down some tools, but I don't think that's going to necessarily hold up Josh Allen in winning this game, as Vegas sees. Kenny Pickett in his rookie full game debut will have a lot of eyes on him. But I think if he can march down the field even a couple times, they're going to see some promise in him, and he's not going to go anywhere. So um, Josh Allen only averages 215 air yards per game versus Pittsburgh in his career. I like it. For some reason, my indication is that the run game for Pittsburgh will have to be strong so that they can balance this attack, even so they can use play action a little bit more with Najee. So I'm going to start Najee Harris. I'm sitting Kenny Pickett. You can play all the regulars, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, with an over-under like 45 at 14 points. You imagine this game's going to be low 30s or high 20s to like the mid-teens to upper teens. So, and I imagine that's probably where we're heading with this game. If Kenny Pickett can get 2 touchdowns in any facet, whether it's with his legs like he did last week, or if he can find the continued air success that we saw. He was 10 for 13 last week, would have been 12 for 13, with his one lone miss being a huge Hail Mary at the end of the game that got picked off, and then the other 2 interceptions, which went through, Chase Claypool and Pat Fryermuth's hands. It is what it is. But if he can continue that past success, you may see Kenny Pickett actually, I would say, move the offense more effectively than Mitch Trubisky did, and he's just been sitting on the bench for Pittsburgh. So I still am taking the Bills in this one, however. There's no reason not to. So learning curve for the Steelers. Mike Tomlin has to probably know that going into this game because the Bills are good everywhere. Moving along to another game that is nowhere near more interesting, unfortunately. The 2-2 Bears versus the 3-1 Vikings. Let me see real quick. 7.5-point favorite for the Vikings currently, which means that so far we've gone through 3 games and none of them are projected to be close. Over-under is at 44. I, again, don't have any interest in anything the Bears are doing. They are still bad. David Montgomery's out again, so it'll be more Khalil Herbert. If you're desperate, you can keep relying on Darnell Mooney, but it looks like until he catches some touchdowns. Last week he was 4 catches for 94 yards, which is an okay fantasy day. If he catches a touchdown in there, he has 20 points plus, plus or minus, whether you're PPR or whether you have yardage bonuses. If he doesn't get that touchdown, I don't think I'm really all that into Darnell Mooney. Justin Fields showed off a little bit of his feet last week, as well as his arm being a little bit more accurate. So giving the Bears the you can't go anywhere but up from here outlook. I don't have any fantasy interest, but if they can win a football game off some solid offense, then maybe I'll change my stance. Personal opinion. So for the Vikings, can you keep Justin Jefferson going? Kirk Cousins this year. He's been 250, a touchdown or 2, and an interception or 2 just about every game. So nothing really surprising with that. Dalvin Cook is going to probably have himself a game. The Bears defense is an ideal matchup to get him back on track. Chicago has allowed 183 rush yards per game this season, which is absolutely insane. And if Cousins can stay accurate, this game, though, is easily decided. He needs to keep up with Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, even get Irv Smith involved if you have to. I don't have any reason to deny the Vikings will probably win this game. The Bears need to grow, and they aren't going to do that in 1 week. James Cook, probably going to be my start of the week from this game, and I'm sitting every single Bear because I don't trust them, if I have said that. So, moving along. Chargers 2-2 at the Browns 2-2. We were gonna do a host v host on this game until Taylor had reported and put himself on the injury list. just to mix it up a little bit and get two middle of the road teams that really have to improve. Unfortunately, he's not here to refute his side of the story and to give me his score for this game. So it's only up to me, and I'm not going to keep scoring him because that's just not fair. That's just not how.
Stop it.
Yeah,
Get some help.
it's not fair. We're going to stop it. So Chargers, they're coming off a win versus Houston, which you would expect. Um, I think Eckler had the biggest breakout game that was needed in the NFL. Huge game last week, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 1 in the air, had a 35-point fantasy performance. Absolutely elite against a team that allows running yards. And the Chargers, even though they let Houston back in the game, came away with a win. The big question for me is, can Eckler maintain a solid performance? He's not going to rush like Nick Chubb will. But if he can be that beneficial part to the team, especially if they're going to be missing Keenan Allen, with Keenan Allen out, it allows a lot more attention to be drawn to Mike Williams. Josh Palmer is perfectly fine as a suitable wide receiver too at this point. Then you're down to DeAndre Carter and Jalen Guyton. Gerald Everett is not out of the realm of possibility of being a very nice start this week, almost a sneaky start. Same with David Njoku. But I think the Browns offense, as far as getting Njoku in, they have to start relying more on a back and forth between Cooper and Njoku. So Amari Cooper has been he's been on and off. He had a couple really good games. He had a couple games where he was held up. And some of that is Jacoby Brissett. Some of that is the way that the offense was able to move the ball that particular game. So I think that Nick Chubb is probably going to be the big factor for the Browns moving the offense the same way he has been the first 4 weeks. It's not going to be a huge difference here. But the Chargers being, especially without Joey Bosa, I think that the Chargers are going to have to rely more on linebackers to spread the field on the midsection behind the defensive 7. So it's an interesting game, and that's why I had chosen it as a host v. host. For all of the spits and giggles, I will give a score, and I think the Chargers, they've had a semi-rough couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, they get blown out by the Jaguars and lost 38-10. Last week, they almost let the Texans get back into it because of Dameon Pierce and really Davis Mills, and then they couldn't convert for a little bit. So I think the Chargers come and they win this game. The Browns are coming off of that win against Atlanta. Or did they? No, Atlanta won. I apologize. Almost won against Atlanta. So Browns also actually have something to prove too, because they had 3 turnovers in that game after only having 2 in the first 3 weeks. So that actually changes my mind a little bit. I'm still going to take the Chargers. I'll go on the Chargers on this one. 28, Browns 25. Let me see what the over-under is real quick. 47. So I'm on the over there, which is a chance. There's a chance for that, but. And then the spread, I imagine, on this will probably be, Browns are 2.5-point dogs to the Chargers, so much closer. First interesting game of the show that we've talked about. So, I will start Gerald Everett. I think I'm gonna sit Cooper in this one, either Cooper or Njoku. I don't know. You start one of them, so it's 50-50. I'm going to say sit Cooper, which means he'll naturally have 8 catches and 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I'll be very wrong. The 1-3 Lions traveling to New England to take on the 1-3 Patriots. Patriots are favored by 3 points. I'm kind of shocked at that because it's Bailey Zappi. Zappy? Is it Zap? Zappy. Bailey Zappy. Anyway, he's starting with, he might not have his wide receiver 1 in Jacoby Myers versus Detroit that just laid 45 points without their top 2 wide receivers, without DJ Chark and without. So that's very interesting to me. I don't know if I agree with that one. The over-under is at 45.5. That's probably par for the course given Detroit's offense. Their offense is much better than their defense. I don't think there's any surprise there. Um, but that just leads to, can the offense maintain a momentum? I feel like this 1-3 is a very disappointing record for the Lions given their scoring so far this year. If you can get Amon-Ra St. Brown back this week, I know he's questionable, like we talked about in the 9 segment. I talked about in the 9 segment. There's no we here, unfortunately. But as I talked about in the 9 segment, if you get him back, then I think this offense opens up, and that switches it back to the Lions because Amon-Ra St. Brown has been absolutely amazing, and he makes a huge difference for opposing secondaries when you know you have to cover somebody who's starting to come into this very good / elite role. The Lions' defensive woes, unfortunately, also have to end. That's why I have good hope for Bailey Zappi. The Patriots play at a slower pace than the Lions do, but it seems like, especially against the short pass, the Patriots are very good. And as I said a couple weeks ago, and it's changed a little bit, I believe the Lions have expanded. They're now, I want to say, 6th in depth of pass is Jared Goff, 7th in depth of pass. So, but Jared Goff hasn't been throwing a lot of deep passes at a lot of times, and now it's changed a little bit, so it's back. But I would imagine that the Patriots in the middle of the field, that'll be their go-to. Bill Belichick is a smart coach. We know that. Trust in Bill, like Taylor always says. And if this New England offense can keep pace with Green Bay, I would imagine that Detroit seems more efficient. I mean, they're 5th in the league in scoring, but the Patriots' defense is there, and then the Lions' defense is very, very ineffective. And then there's Bailey Zappi, who went against the best third down defense in Green Bay and was, effective at moving the football, forced overtime. Did very good for a rookie. So I'm starting Zappi if you need to. There's going to be zero chance that I start him. I think a lot of folks won't start him, but I would have some faith that he has a good game, in the 17 to 20 fantasy point range. I'm going to sit TJ Hawkinson, and that is because of that midfield, like I talked about, that midfield pressure that could be there, knock on wood. That would be my guess as to where the pressure is going. Also, his usage, I mean, he had a huge top of a game last week with, 160, 170 some yards and 2 touchdowns. It's just not really feasible to do again. So I think there's going to be some attention drawn to him on the defensive side of the ball. So if you're still here for this video, because I am sitting here and talking, and it is not the same show, please give a like, because I'm doing this because I love the Fantasy Flyer followers, the feedback that we have got. I love all of y'all for everything that you do to help give us an opportunity to get better. So just want to throw that in there once again. Seahawks and the Saints will be my next game. Seahawks are 2-2. The Saints are 1-3. Let's see here. Saints and Seahawks. Where are you? That's next week. That's why. Big running joke. Saints Seahawks 45.5 over under the spread. I imagine this is probably going to be the Seahawks a little bit. No, Saints 5 on. Oh, that's right. Alvin Kamara is back. So yeah, Saints are 5-point favorites. Seahawks are 5-point dogs. So Geno Smith has to continue his success. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf have been extremely key to the receiving game. Rashad Penny had a fantastic game versus Detroit last week, but the New Orleans defense is just a little bit different. The D-line has a little bit more packed talent. Demario Davis is in there, who has been extremely efficient. Pete Werner has actually led the league in tackles going into Week 5 because of the way the system is set out. New Orleans defense has allowed the 6th least completions in the league so far. So it kind of means Walker and Penny will be key to keeping the offense moving, keeping the balance on the offense. New Orleans ranks 12th in rush yards allowed, so they've allowed the 12th most rush yards. But they also rank 30th in blitz percentage, which means they kind of rely on a success of a zone coverage to a certain extent. I feel like if that system stays in place, it's going to be effective on the Seahawks. Um, but it just depends on how Geno Smith keeps going. Geno Smith is second in completion percentage so far this year. If he being Geno Smith, can get opportunities to Will Dissly, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant, then you're going to see the Seahawks kind of move the offense more than the Saints would probably like, and you're going to make Andy Dalton play from behind, which in history has shown us will create turnovers. So Seattle's defense, however, doesn't create enough pressure. They only blitz 19.7% of the time so far this year. They are 24th in sacks, ranking of the 32 teams. Um, if you're if Andy Dalton keeps an eye out for those patterns to continue, he can probably have a fair amount of success moving the offense. He'll have Jarvis Landry. He's obviously going to have Chris Olave, still a must start. Um, and with Alvin Kamara back, especially, that team becomes very flexible in its three-level offensive game, from the line of scrimmage in the trenches to the short game to the deep game. You have it all there for a little bit. So I would imagine this game goes under. Seahawks are 28th in rush yards allowed, so they load up on Alvin Kamara early, and they actually give him 70%, 75% of the snaps. There's no Latavius Murray there anymore. He went to the Broncos. It looks like Mark Ingram is the only other one in the backfield who's worth, rush yards or gets rush attempts. I shouldn't say worth that, but that would be my those two indications between Seattle being 28th in rush yards and being less competition in the backfield. Alvin Kamara is a great start this week. I'm starting Rashad Penny. I'm sitting Kenneth Walker. He is injured. A. B. Rashad Penny went absolute ham sandwich last Sunday. And I think he's earned a few more reps. And like I said, Kenny Walker's hurt. So even if he does end up being active for the game, he may not see a whole bunch of snaps. So moving along, Dolphins 3-1 at the Jets 2-2. Side note before we get into this one, I saw one of the expert picks on Twitter saying the Jets win this game 23-22, and I don't know about that one. The Jets are 3.5-point dogs to the Dolphins. Let's real check on the over/under real quick. It's 45. I don't believe the Jets have it's Teddy Bridgewater, so let's slow down the offense for Miami a little bit. But assuming Tyreek and Waddle play, you can't cover them both with just Sauce Gardner. Jordan Whitehead's back there, but I'm not amazingly thrilled by how effective he's been this year. The small steps that Miami's offense can take will show how effective they can be. I feel like the first drive of this game, maybe first two drives, will kind of show you how Miami's going to play this game against the Jets. Rushing the ball isn't the worst idea, but another game where if you're going to use Raheem Mostert to run the ball, Chase Edmonds may be in the pass game as your third down, your change of pace back, and then you're going to see more of the Trent Sherfield, the River Craycraft, obviously Tyreek Hill and Waddle, assuming they play. You might even see some Smythe, just to spread the ball a little bit more. Teddy Bridgewater was very solid at that in a slow Broncos offense last year, so it is good to see that he's getting another opportunity. It's bad that it comes at the expense of Tua being out with no timetable for a return. But if Teddy can be successful, especially with the tools around him, it's going to look good for a Miami team that has now built the solid basis where Tua doesn't have to necessarily rush back. The Jets also don't pack the box at all. The average depth of defender is 9 yards on defensive plays. So they don't put 7 on the line. They don't put 8 on the line. And even if they do pull out of those formations when they do them. 9 yards at depth of play, they play for the pass. So it kind of shows that Miami's going to have to be a little more creative, again, potentially with the run game. They're only 11th in yak allowed, the Jets are. So that 9 yards is showing that they are defending deep passes a little bit more effectively than they were last year, especially. Um, Zach Wilson, we know, has to get some rest off. Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson took steps back last week, most notably in targets. Flacco was throwing 50 times a game, or 52 on average through 3 weeks. Zach Wilson stepped in at 34, and he spread the ball even a hair bit, a hair more, hair bit. Good God, still can't speak. Miami is 31st ranked in passing defense currently, so that includes points scored, which of course brings that down because they have some larger passing games that they've given up to the Ravens, for example. Zach Wilson, he's probably not going to be able to run through his progressions as much, but he can keep his options open and move the ball. This game's also an opportunity for Breece Hall to continue his charge forward into closer to RB1 status. He kind of seems like a solid RB2. If you just look at last week, he's been going up in snaps. They've slowly increased from week 1 to now. He had 66% of snaps last week, which is probably close to his peak. I don't see the Jets completely phasing out Michael Carter, but Carter had 44% snap count last week and is entering kind of that touchdown-dependent RB status in sense of fantasy. Dolphins are 10th in the league defending the run, giving up 4.2 yards per carry. They only give up 15 fantasy points per game to running backs, which means that they don't do well in the red zone. So, just spoiler alert there. Running backs don't do well in red zone attacks against Miami. Both the Jets and the Dolphins are two of the worst in the league at defending third downs, but the Dolphins have also had the tougher schedule, so I felt that that's important to note. I'm starting Teddy Bridgewater over Baker Mayfield, Justin Fields. I'm starting him over Zach Wilson. I think he can easily be QB, we'll say 14 to 17 range this week, if not QB 12 to 15, somewhere in that neck of the woods. He can definitely be a serviceable quarterback. That's why he was signed. I'm going to sit Michael Carter because of the aforementioned snap decrease. And Michael Carter still plays a good part of the pass game with Zach Wilson. We saw last year at times he had 9, 10, 11 targets out of the backfield, but I feel like that could spread to Breece Hall, who has shown some of his pass catching ability this year. So I'm going to take the Dolphins in this one. It says 3.5. I don't really trust Justin. I don't really trust Zach Wilson to step up again and just throw like a 5-touchdown, 300-yard game and not have turnovers. And Breece Hall has 80 yards. I just don't see that really out of this Jets offense. So I'm going to go Miami 24, Jets 16. Next game, Falcons and the Buccaneers. Both teams 2-2. They're fighting for the NFC South lead in this game. We'll go real quick on the over-under. It is 46.5 at an over-under, and the spread for this game is 10 points in favor of the Buccaneers. I think that's appropriate or very close to appropriate. It might be a hair high. But Marcus Mariota is coming off of his worst game of the year. Still a win because of the turnover battle that Atlanta won, but Atlanta's also going to be missing two very key pieces in Cordero Patterson, who went on IR earlier this week, as well as Kyle Pitts. So this hurts the already, I'll say, stingy offense. They're going to turn to Chase Huntley and Tyler Algier in the backfield. I expect Algier to get a bulk of whatever rushing snaps can be had. When Patterson left the game, he came in, was effective, had 84 yards and 10 carries. Without Kyle Pitts, the Drake London train has to keep rolling. I mean, he has 41% of target share right now, and I can't imagine that he will be anything shy of 50%. Definitely not going to be below 40% this week. Olamide Zaccheaus will probably have to step up a little bit. You may see some more Brian Edwards, some Kaderil Hodge. The interesting thing to note is Parker Hess actually has more red zone targets this year than Kyle Pitts does going into week 5. So it's only 2-1, but to show that they have a little bit of passing trust in Parker Hess. I am going to take a absolute dart throw on Parker Hess because somebody is going to. Jamel Dean will likely guard Drake London. And Antoine Winfield and Michael Edwards will be back there. It's going to be a tough, tough day for Drake London if he doesn't run some crisp routes. That's my prediction for that one. Hot take right there. Um, the targeted secondary will just they could shut him down. It depends on how he runs. For Tampa Bay, they have all their weapons back. Mike Evans is back. Um, Leonard Fournette's still healthy. Chris Godwin's back and is cleared. He's not even questionable, so it looks like he's all set to rock and roll. He did leave last Sunday night's game briefly with a injury, and he came back in. Tom Brady, obviously, as he showed last week, can throw the ball still 359 yards, I want to say, and 3 touchdowns or something in the realm of that. There's no reason to expect this offense to slow down. Atlanta's secondary has been the best part of their defense through 4 games. But you just can't. I've said it before with Taylor on the show. We've said it so many weeks. There's no 1 and 2 in this wide receiver core. There's 1A and 1B. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I almost said Edmonds, and that's just mixing both names. That's very, very wrong. Very, very wrong. But Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they both can have anywhere between 8 and 14 targets. They can both have anywhere between 7 and 12 catches. And you just can't guard them both without leaving a huge hole somewhere. Now, Cameron Brate will be out for this game. We talked about that in the 9 segment. But even if he's out, next in line, Cade Otton stepped in and caught a couple balls. Rashad White out of the backfield has been very serviceable. They've now started to include Leonard Fournette in the pass game. And he's not afraid to run these kind of, I won't say hook schemes out of the backfield, but to the middle of the field even, or if he runs out in turnarounds, out routes, and then he's out and go or out and stops. So I think Tampa Bay easily wins this game. I would expect a big game from Godwin and Evans yet again, and even a fair turnout from Fournette. The rushing defense for Atlanta is nothing to write home about. And there's also no reason to think they'll only run this ball 6 times this game. So I'm interested to see how the development of Rashad White goes, and I'm interested to see how easy of a game this can be. We did see the Falcons keep up with the Rams back in week 2. And, well, I shouldn't say keep up. They caught up. It was just too little too late. So they can play against some of the higher-powered offenses. I guess it's kind of borderline whether the Rams are considered that high-powered offense anymore, but they played very well. They got 31 points on the board against the Falcons, so there's something to be said about that. So the Falcons have something here. It's just whether they can keep up with the experience, the professionalism, the accuracy of Tom Brady, the effectiveness of the entire offense, both passing and running, and whether they can get through the entire linebacker and cornerback and really all in all the great defense that the Buccaneers have. So I'm going to throw a dart and start Parker Hess, and I'm going to sit Marcus Mariota, which sounds completely counterintuitive, but I think Parker Hess could be okay in like a tournament dart throw. So I'm going to go with him. He's probably going to play 50 to 60% of snaps. Moving on, Titans 2-2 at the Commanders 1-3. Boy, are these teams not as exciting as we wanted them to be. The Titans are 2-point favorites right now. I say right now as of 11:30 on Friday night. The over-under is 43 for this game. Titans come into this game on the back of that W against Indiana where they almost let Matt Ryan lead the Colts back into that game. The Titans will be without Treylon Burks. Again, Robert Woods will step into that wide receiver 1 role. He had 9 targets last week, but he only caught 4 of his first 5, and that was it for his game. He had 85 yards. He did have a touchdown. He played very well. Other than that, it's really Derrick Henry, and we know that. I think the Commanders know that. Derrick Henry had a great game last week. He turned into another touchdown. He continues to catch passes out of the backfield. The Commanders' defense has looked just less than ideal over the last 3 weeks. If Ryan Tannehill can stay on target, his success has been dependent on some use of the play action. And again, this is a good opportunity to kind of work out that play action muscle with the offense. Um, this can be an easy win for them. The Commanders have not gotten off to a fast start at any time this year. Through 4 games, I don't think they've scored more than I want to say 20 points in the first 2 quarters of all 4 combined. They don't start games well. Um, the Titans have the highest scoring percentage in reaching the end zone. That would be their goal. They're over 90% scoring when they reach the end zone. Keep that going. For Washington, they need to start the game off fast, and it'll be a little tougher. They will not have Jahan Dotson, who's been a red zone target for them. And like I said, they look very bad in the first 15 to 25 minutes of games. So it hurts the outlook for this team in my mind. Curtis Samuel is starting to challenge Terry McLaurin for wide receiver 1 on this team, just based on stats. Terry McLaurin has been a flat tire after flat tire this year. He hasn't successfully utilized passes. He hasn't seen as many targets as Curtis Samuel. I think the results will determine in the next couple weeks if Terry McLaurin should be favored over Curtis Samuel in a lot of lineups. But especially without Jahan Dotson this week, I want to see who gets the red zone targets before that decision is clear in my mind anyway. Curtis Samuel, for me, is still a must start. I'm intrigued by J.D. McKissick and his pass catching ability over Gibson. Brian Robinson should be available for this game. Shouts out to Brian Robinson for returning from his unfortunate carjacking and lower leg, lower body shooting that happened a little over a month ago, 6 weeks ago. It's interesting that he's coming back. Tough guy right there. Could see his season debut. It might be a slow-moving game at times, especially if Wentz can't get that offense going like he hasn't all year. But, the Titans give up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receiver through 5 weeks. The Commanders give up the 2nd most. The only problem is Carson Wentz throws the ball a lot more than Ryan Tannehill does. So, unless that changes this week, I have seen some folks be on the Robert Woods train with Treylon Burks out, and I will be as well. He's in my fantasy lineup on my dynasty team. So I'm going to ride with Robert Woods. I'm going to start him. He is my start because of that. I'm hoping that goes well. My other start would be Curtis Samuel. So if you have either one of them, fire them up. My sit is going to be Gibson. Tennessee is 14th against the run. Washington is 16th, which is, obviously middle of the field, but I have much more faith in Derrick Henry, breaking that defense down than Gibson breaking down Tennessee's. So, a little bit more of my take on that. I'm going to take the Titans in this one as well, because I don't think Wentz gets off to a good start. I'm going to say he'll probably get a touchdown, couple field goals hidden. I'm going to say Titans 21, Commanders 15. 13. 13. Math is tough. 3-3-6. So 21-13 Titans. Texans 0-3-1 at the Jaguars 2-2. This was going to be game 2 of the host v host. Again, Texans not really moving the football as well as they probably should. However, one thing you can promise is that Dameon Pierce, aka Damian Fierce, who was the RB4 last week, that's a fact. He is for real. We knew that going into the draft, later into the, not going into the draft, but going into later into the offseason, close to our dynasty draft, where he started to pick up in preseason and in OTAs. And he has really broken out. He's starting to catch some passes, which is just immaculate for his fantasy production. Dameon Pierce, to me, is the best thing besides Brandon Cooks about this Texans offense. Brandon Cooks, obviously, when there's accurate throws made at him, he's a standard for 5 to 8 catches and, 70 yards or so and probably a touchdown in there. So, but Dameon Pierce is becoming another weapon all and all. The key to this game for me is third downs. The Texans are facing Jacksonville's fourth overall defense, and they'll be forced at probably more often than not to make late down plays, make third and sixes, third and eights, even potentially longer than that. Lawrence's third down rate has dropped the last 2 weeks, even against the Chargers where they blew him out. So he's dropped from 47% to 38% on third down success. So if he can continue that, this game should easily be the Jaguars. Last week was an offensive debacle against the Eagles, where they just couldn't get anything moving. There's 4 fumbles from Trevor Lawrence, 11 for 23, I believe it was. He did not have a good game, and those games are going to happen. But it's bouncing back and this is a good opportunity against the Texans defense that does not stand out. Christian Kirk could have an absolute ceiling game. Yeah, I know 2 touchdowns and 80 yards that he had in week 1 or week 2. That's pretty close to it, so I wouldn't be surprised if he replicates that. And I think Houston's going to end up taking an L on this one just a little bit harder than they probably want to, because they need to be concise. Specifically, Davis Mills needs to be concise. The over-under is at 43.5. I will get the spread real quick. I imagine Jacksonville is 7-point favorites. I'm going to take Jacksonville. We'll say Jacksonville 27, Texans 16. I think it's going to be a little bit more Jacksonville than we think. I think the Jaguars defense also has a lot more to prove. Start Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to sit Rex Burkhead. If you're starting to see Dameon Pierce take over some of those pass-catching duties, he had one more catch than Rex Burkhead, if I remember correctly, from last week. Burkhead has already been phased out of the run game, it seems, entirely. So sit Rex Burkhead. Don't touch it. Moving on to the 4 o'clock games, 2-2 49ers at the 1-3 Panthers. There isn't really much to say about this game. The Panthers are they're becoming the new Bears for me. Like, they are just very, very unentertaining to me. They're just not. They're just very, very bad. Every football game that especially with Baker Mayfield, like, I feel very bad for Panthers fans because now you went from Sam Darnold, who already they traded away so much for Sam Darnold, and he hasn't been, we'll say, lighting it up. He hasn't been atrocious, but he hasn't been lighting it up like you would expect. Then he goes down and you end up with Baker Mayfield, who, granted, they got for a low-round draft pick. He took a pay cut to come in. But, man, trading
that is a disgusting
Baker
act.
Mayfield is a disgusting act. It's turned into something that's very, very, very bad. Very bad. So I have no faith in this. I mean, the 49ers offense is not, I believe they're 20th in offensive efficiency, and they're first in defensive efficiency. Christian McCaffrey is the only thing. If you have all of the fantasy players or all of the players from the Panthers to start on fantasy, I'm not starting anyone whose last name isn't McCaffrey, because he's putting in good work. He's churning yards to go upfield. He's now reinvigorated his pass catching. He's, even with Baker Mayfield, the short game is working for Christian McCaffrey. Everybody else is suffering because of because of Baker Mayfield. That was very wrong. That. But Baker Mayfield is making those not making those passing plays like he should. It's tough to watch most Panthers games, it seems, and that's unfortunate. The rush game seems to be, like I said, their only okay part, but you can almost see the team losing its faith in Matt Rule and in Baker Mayfield. You can almost physically see it. On the other side, Jimmy G has kind of picked up where he was last year, picked up where he left off, so to speak. A couple games in there for Trey Lance, but now he's gone for the season. There's no reason to not play anybody from the 49ers. I don't necessarily think it'll be a quote-unquote easy game for them. The Panthers defense can still hold teams at times. We saw them last week have a very good first opening quarter versus the Cardinals, and they were leading. at one point because of a pick six from Frankie Louvu, but this is probably a more concise offense than Kyler Murray is when he's missing pieces. It seems like the offensive line is a little stronger. Also, their run game is far superior to what the Cardinals have been putting out so far this year. So I would start George Kittle. I think this is where George Kittle gets a good game under his belt on his return trek. I think this is where he returns to his normal, I guess we'll say his normal stats, his normal fantasy output. I'm like I said, I'm sitting every Panther that's not named McCaffrey because you just can't trust them because Baker Mayfield is involved with them. That's unfortunately just the root of the problem right now, is that Baker Mayfield is not moving this team the way that it probably should. I mean, Sam Darnold wasn't a home run by any means, but man, there's so much better that you could probably do other than Baker Mayfield, specifically on fantasy teams. I am interested to see. Okay, good. I have plenty of time. Not to worry about any of this. Perfect. Sorry, talking to myself. It happens. Moving along. Eagles 4-0 at the Cardinals that I just mentioned. The Cardinals are 2-2. The Eagles are 5-point favorites, which I think is just a hair low. That's okay. That's kind of fair. Kyler Murray wakes up, then it's not too bad. And he played very well in the second half against the Panthers. The over-under for this game, while it switches over. Where's my over-under? Where'd it go? 49. So it is one of the higher point totals on the slate that we have seen so far. I think it actually is the second highest behind Monday Night Football. This is the second of only 3 4 o'clock games. Let me go back to my notes real quick. Cardinals, they have started off games very poorly. Not quite as poorly as, say, the Commanders. But they are not scoring as much in the first halves. They had a comeback win against the Raiders, I think in week 2 or week 3, that they were down 20-3 or 20 to something. It was bad in the first half in any way. They didn't do very well in the first quarter last week against the Panthers, so that's something that Kyler Murray would have to improve upon, especially against a tough Eagles team. We know what the Eagles have brought to the table. They have built a team that is impressive. They have a high-powered offense. The O-line has been extremely strong. The Cardinals, to get out to that start, they're going to have their O-line match that intensity. The defense from the Eagles, we have seen them, Hassan Reddick, we've seen TJ Edwards, we've seen Fletcher Cox, we've seen a lot of these guys get into the tackle box and bother quarterbacks. Now, Kyler Murray has the ability to scramble, which is a little different than what the Eagles have seen this year to that extent. But if they continue to go in there and make Kyler throw on the run, it could be problematic to getting anything going on offense, particularly in the first half. So it's a battle of the Browns, AJ versus Hollywood. There's Devontae Smith versus Rondale Moore. Pass game could be the scoring. We know that Murray runs. We know that Hurts runs. The rush game for the Eagles has been more dependable than the Cardinals, which is another reason why I think the Cardinals' run game and not allowing those Eagles defenders through is going to be key. James Conner has been underwhelming, we'll say, this year. And the Eagles have been susceptible to the runs at times. They've given up 401 yards through 4 games, which isn't by any means as bad as, say, the Bears. I said the Bears have given up 183 yards per game. The problem is the Bears also have literally 30 more rush attempts to get to their number. The Eagles have only had 80 carries on them, so per carry they're averaging 5. They're giving up 5 yards per run, and I think that's going to be something that you're going to see the Cardinals try and take advantage of. Hollywood Brown is getting an insane amount of targets. Rondale Moore will probably, now with an entirely full week of practice, will probably step into a little bit more of this midfield speed role that we want to see out of Rondale Moore. I'm starting the usuals because of the defensive matchup and how ineffective he's been. I'm still sitting James Conner. I'm sitting Eno Benjamin. I'm sitting Darrell Williams. I'm sorry. You can still start Kyler, Marquise. I especially want a good attention paid to Zach Ertz, who continues to have amazing tight end usage. They also released Max Williams, so it's basically Trey McBride and Zach Ertz, and Ertz still sees by far the majority of snaps. So line up Ertz on that one. Eagles should win this one, I imagine. I'm not going to throw out a score because actually I will. That's a lie. 5 points, over, under, touchdown. I think Sanders will probably get yet another touchdown. So I'm going to go with rush defense. I'm going to go with, we'll say 28-22 Eagles. Moving on to what would have been the third and final host v. host game. Cowboys 3-1 at the Rams 2-2. This is an interesting game for me as a Cowboys fan because I think this is a big enough challenge for both teams. The Rams have looked very bad under defensive pressure, and that is what the Cowboys have been bringing all year. The entire left side of that offensive line has not looked good for the Rams. I imagine Micah Parsons will be lined up on the left against Noteboom quite a lot, just trying to get around him. And if not, you can really throw Dorrance Armstrong. You can throw Quentin Bahana over there. You can throw a lot of people on Noteboom and really wreck a lot of the not only rush capabilities, but the pocket protection that you can afford Matthew Stafford. So far, he hasn't seen a whole heck of a lot of that disruption Matthew Stafford has. Cooper Kupp has 42 receptions through 4 games, which does lead the league by a fair amount. However, Dallas technically, statistically, leads the league in wide receiver defense, and that's for multiple reasons, including bothering the quarterback. One of the other ones is that they haven't had an amazing high-powered offense to really go up against. So it'll be interesting to see if Cooper Kupp can continue to reign his terror. We saw last week Tyler Higbee had an insane amount of targets and catches. That's going to be another point of contention for Dallas defense. DeMarcus Lawrence will probably guard most of the right side of the offensive line. It's going to be quite the game for Stafford, Akers, Darrell Henderson. And I think they have to pull something out of the toolkit, so to speak, to keep this game close. Not keep the game close, because I think the game will be close in general. And that's because the opposite side of the football, Cooper Rush and company for the Cowboys, they are 3-1, but they, similar to the Rams facing the Cowboys defense, they haven't faced a team quite like the Rams. If Cooper Rush performs like last week, he may get bitten. He's been very protective of the football. I think he's only turned it over once in 3.5 games, which is very good to see out of somebody who is now 4-0 of their first 4 starts as the Cowboys quarterback. He has Michael Gallup back, who once again will have yet another week of practice to get used to Cooper Rush, know what to expect. We talked about Tony Pollard being questionable earlier. I assume he probably plays, even though he's sick. Who else was? CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has to play. There's no reason not to think that CeeDee Lamb plays. But if Cooper Rush can expand upon CeeDee Lamb, who will probably be guarded by Jalen Ramsey, if Cooper Rush can expand with Michael Gallup, keep Noah Brown in the offense and as a reasonable threat. Even if Pollard doesn't play, even though I think Pollard will play, but even if Pollard doesn't play, I think the pass game will still be able to move the ball. Aaron Donald, of course, is the biggest problem and on the actual, defensive line. Bobby Wagner has been absolutely threatening as well. He's been astonishing almost. I think he's 4th in the league in tackles. So it all comes down to whether the Dallas Cowboys offensive line can block. They will need to block. It hasn't been great this year. They've let some pressure get through.
Block, and then you pull up your pants.
Right, you pull up your pants. So if the Cowboys can keep Aaron Donald, we'll say under 4 to 5 pressures, this might be okay for the Cowboys. That's going to be their issue. Both defenses can get to these quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford has obviously thrown more interceptions this year. He was leading interceptions up until week 4, and then he had a very solid performance last week. He only had the one pick six in week 4, which it's only one interception, but it hurts. So I'm starting Gallup. I'm going to sit Ezekiel Elliott. I think this is going to be a problem. The rush game is going to be a bit of a problem for Zeke this week. I feel like the Rams will probably shut that down and make Cooper Rush throw. And at that point, trust in the zone that the Rams have. This game is 2.5 point. Let me make sure I have this right as well. Cowboys, the over-under is at 42, which is probably about right. And then for the Rams are favored by 5.5 points. So I'm gonna take the Rams here, but I think it's gonna be close. It may even come down to a field goal if Dallas's defense, especially if Dallas's defense can stay on the Rams. I'm gonna say 28-26. It'll be less than that. I'm gonna say 24-22 Rams. 24-22 Rams. That's my take. To the Sunday Night Football game, real quick. Not even real quick, but Bengals 2-2 at the Ravens 2-2. Both teams. It is a little bit of a barn burner for the AFC East, AFC East, AFC North, AFC North. I can get those all messed up. Ravens favored by 3.5 points to the Bengals. The over-under is 48. Both these offenses obviously have been gone for a very, very, very large portion of this season. You don't have to go far into this game to see what the problems can be for the Bengals. It's been the same problems that really, other than last week, have been present all year long. The O-line, Joe Mixon is not having a good time, bro. He averages 2.7 yards per carry, which is by far the worst out of any of the RB1s, by far any one of the RB top 30 running backs. He has less than 400 yards through 4 games. I mean, he's been perfunctory to say the least, and that's my word of the day, I guess. Jamar Chase hasn't also quite gotten going. T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd have kind of been there to substantiate. We've seen the success of Hayden Hurst, which, like we talked about, he did not practice today, but very easily could still play Sunday night. The Ravens, on the other side, they have to keep continuing to get Mark Andrews involved. That offense is not quite itself when Mark Andrews can't get open, if he's relegated to blocking, if he's relegated to double coverage. He had a big flop last week, but he's still tight end 3 on the year. And you have to trust him, and there's no reason not to. Just had a good coverage game, good zone coverage in the middle of the field. The consistent workload outside of Mark Andrews is a little tough to put your finger on, especially if Rashad Bateman is going to be out. Devin Duvernay is probably the most trustworthy, in my opinion. He had 2 touchdowns on 4 catches. I think that was week 2. He had another touchdown catch week 3, I believe. So he's there. He's doing very well as far as his speed, as far as his catching ability. He has Lamar Jackson's attention. As far as the run games, J.K. Dobbins came out of nowhere last week. Lamar Jackson can run it. So the Cincinnati defense has not been a slouch by any means, and they have been very tight on the run. They've allowed the 4th least yards per carry in the league, and the defense has kept them in the game down the stretch. They've kept them in games, both of the games that they won. Well, I guess they didn't really need to against the Jets, but still, point taken. They're tight on the run, they're tight in the box, and if they can continue their secondary successes, it may be more of the Bengals pulling out the win when there's no Rashad Bateman. You're missing a little bit of speed on the sides there. Demarcus Robinson is a sneaky play here. with Bateman out, you may see a little bit more time for Demarcus Robinson. He also had a touchdown week 1, so he hasn't seen the field a whole heck of a lot, but when he's seen it, he's been useful. So my start this week is I'm going to go back to Jamar Chase. One of these games, he's just due for an 8-catch, 120-yard, he's just due for this explosion. I'm going to sit Joe Mixon because I want to see so much more production out of him. I don't know if he's just being a little not reading the gaps right. I don't know if it's Lyle Collins and him aren't on the same page on the right side and he is on the left, or if he's not on the left or he's on the right. He's not quite being the Joe Mixon that was, RB5 last year. So I'm going to leave Mixon. I'm sitting Joe Mixon. You're not going to sit Joe Mixon. You have to play Joe Mixon in leagues. I guess I'll say that. But I'm not going to play him on DFS just yet. So let's put it that way. I'll split that up. And you're not going to not play him on Dynasty. So I guess that sit isn't even really a sit. I guess it's just...
You're blowing it, man!
I know. I'm going to move on. Raiders, 1-3 at the Chiefs, 3-1 Monday Night Football. I feel like the question of this game is how many points do the Raiders lose by, and that's about it. The Chiefs, the over-under is 51.5, which is the highest on the Week 5 slate. And then we will see the Chiefs are favored by 7 points. This is our fifth game that is favored by a touchdown or more. So there could be some blowouts, or there could not. This is kind of one of the games where I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders kind of snuck into that +7 range. They kind of beat the spread. Josh Jacobs has been quietly the RB4 on the year, RB5 on the year. I'm somewhere in that neighborhood. I think he's RB5. He is seeing 90% of rushing snaps. He started to get pass catching work again, which again might be hurt by the likely return of Hunter Renfrow, which seems inevitable this week. If not this week, definitely next week. But he is he's started to get some red zone attention as well. So if Jacobs can continue to be this little monster in the backfield, and even when he's not in the backfield, like I said, you throw him out as a pass catcher, it's another short field option with Darren Waller. Waller has been a little underwhelming. Devontae Adams is the one who has all the attention, but Jacobs and Waller alleviate some of that. Hunter Renfrow will surely alleviate some of that. Using all of those tools actually could help Devontae Adams create a little more space. He's sometimes getting double covered. We know he can jump and create that space on a lot of times, especially in 50-50 balls. But if the usage is spread accordingly, and especially based on defensive coverage, you can use that a lot better with Adams. The Chiefs can blitz a lot. We saw that in the first 3 weeks. They blitzed a fair amount. That could help with one-on-ones, but you need Carr to be a little bit, I wouldn't say quicker, but quicker. I mean, it's quicker. Waller is the tight end 9, surprisingly. But there's no reason to believe that there couldn't be a sneaky Las Vegas Raiders game, offensive game in any way, around the corner for this team. For the Chiefs, they're at home again, so +1 there. Mahomes is elite still. You took away his, everyone said he was going to be kind of not hurting, but, it was going to be different without Tyreek there, right? And right now he has the same record. It doesn't look like he can't make plays happen. It doesn't look like Tyreek Hill made Patrick Mahomes in any way. And it's not the other way around by any means. But I can imagine Mahomes' magic in all likelihood, will continue. The pass game is just simply too strong. The big thing I want to focus on in this game is to see how they use Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco had 21% of snaps last week, got a substantial workload for a snap count. McKinnon is borderline drop list, especially if he doesn't have any good usage this game. He can't seem to trust all three. CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just seems to be They're one, but not in a rushing capacity all the time, which is very unique. Andy Reid has done some interesting things that with that play calling and using him more in the pass game, and sometimes he gets rushes, and then other times he excels at rushes, and it's there's some questions there. We'll just put it that way as far as how he's being used consistently, but there is no question about his effectiveness. He's clearly an RB1 in his usage. I think stat wise he's RB6 or RB5 on the year. So if Pacheco starts biting into anyone's snaps, it'll probably be Jerick McKinnon's. Travis Kelce and Juju Smith-Schuster, you can trust. At least you can trust Kelce. Juju in this matchup, I think he'll be okay. I don't see any reason to look away from really anybody. I would put a very keep a sneaky eye on Marquez Valdez-Scantling this week if he plays. I didn't see a Q tag, so I don't know why I said if he plays, but the speed and the deep ball here, it's been something that Mahomes has really enjoyed against the Raiders at different times, off and on. And MVS has that speed that Tyreek Hill that replaced Tyreek Hill. So I'm taking the Chiefs in this one for sure. I'm going to say Chiefs 33, Raiders 28. And I think the Raiders, if it's close through the first quarter, I will say first half. If it's close by halftime, this could be one of those games where they go back and forth in the second. Derek Carr knows the Chiefs, and the Chiefs know Derek Carr, and each team has played each other enough to kind of know how to expect and how to perform under pressure. So start Josh Jacobs in every format. Sit Jerick McKinnon until he gets useful red zone targets, useful catches. Real quick, we'll roll through my fantasy flyers, my 5 fantasy flyers. Time for the pros. Number 1 is going to be Parker Hess. I brought it up in the Falcons Buccaneers game. The Buccaneers will probably be at least a good chunk enthused with Drake London. Drake London has good red zone usage. Like I said, 41% target share. There's no Kyle Pitts. Olamide Zaccheaus will definitely be seeing some more targets. Brian Edwards, perhaps, Kadarius Hodge. But Parker Hess has 2 red zone targets. I'm going to take the touchdown upside here, and I'm going to take a flyer on him. Number 2 is Marquez Callaway. I didn't bring his name up when we talked about the Saints-Seahawks game, but he was the wide receiver 2 last week. We know that there isn't a lot of pressure being applied in some instances to opposing quarterbacks by the Seahawks defense. And the Seahawks secondary is not afraid to give up yards. So I think Marquez Callaway could be another high-quality fantasy flyer. Number 3, I'm going with a quarterback. I'm going with Teddy Bridgewater. Like I said, if you need a quarterback for some reason, if you have Baker Mayfield, get rid of him. If you have Justin Fields, don't start him. That's been my stance for 2 weeks, so that's nothing new. Teddy Bridgewater has the tools. Teddy Bridgewater has the matchup to be successful this week. Start Teddy Bridgewater. Number 4, I'm taking Darius Slayton from the Giants. The Giants need some sort of passing game against the Packers, and I just see Darius Slayton as being somebody who can step up. If you're not comfortable with Darius Slayton, I won't hate on David Bellinger, but that Giants team needs some sort of help in the secondary to pressure the secondary or make moves around the secondary. I'm not talking defense, so I don't know why I brought that up. But Darius Slayton is my 4th fantasy flyer. And number 5 is J.D. McKissick. I see the Commanders-Titans game going one of 2 ways, and I think J.D. McKissick is solidly involved in each. He only had 8 carries for 40 yards, but he had several catches. I want to say 3 or 4 catches last week as well. He almost matched Gibson's workload. Brian Robinson shouldn't touch the passing downs yet. So I'm going with McKissick there because Robinson but probably won't touch the passing downs. He'll probably eat more into Gibson's usage at first. Matchup favors passing downs, so I'm going with J.D. McKissick as my 5th fantasy flyer. Parker Hess, Marquez Callaway, Teddy Bridgewater, Darius Slayton, J.D. McKissick, your 5 fantasy flyers. To end this show, a very short show, once again, please give a like, give a subscribe, give me something to show your support, anything, even if it's a comment that says, yeah, your show is there this week, that's fine. I'm going to give you guys a real quick top 5 and bottom 5 through 4 weeks. We are roughly 20, almost 20, we're 20% of the way through the season now, officially. And I kind of wanted to rank my top 5 and bottom 5 for each position in your fantasies, and then also do that for teams. So I thought this was a little bit different since I can't really do a name game or 4 downs, and I couldn't do host v host. I wanted to give you guys a little something and see if there was any feedback for or opinions generated on it, because this is just narrowly my opinion. This is the opinion portion of the show. So
the guy is drunk, but there he goes.
Yes, here I go. So, for quarterback, my top 5, Jalen Hurts. Is there anything really to say? He had an amazing fantasy output in the second half of last year, and he has just picked right up with the addition of A.J. Brown. He is the QB1 that I would love to have in fantasy. Number 2 is Patrick Mahomes, kind of the same thing. Had a down game versus the Colts, which sometimes he will hit his floor, but every other game he has just put up between 21 and 30 fantasy points, which is what you want from your quarterback. He has elite usage. He has elite instincts. He is elite. So, Patrick Mahomes is my QB3. My QB4 Patrick Mahomes is my QB2. Justin Herbert will be my QB3. We'll learn how to count someday. Justin Herbert has quietly been climbing up the yardage boards, throwing yardage. He's been successful with a lot of his completions. He hasn't thrown as many interceptions the last few weeks. I like Justin Herbert on the sense that if it's like this without Keenan Allen, it can only get better when you have that other weapon there. And if they continue to utilize Austin Eckler the way they should and Gerald Everett the way they should, Herbert has a ceiling there, and I am betting on him approaching it, if not hitting it. So, Justin Herbert is my QB3. QB4 is Josh Allen. The offense is like the second or third best offense in the league. Stephon Diggs has just been reeling him in. There's no reason to go away from Josh Allen. I don't need to go into this one. My QB5 is Jared Goff, and this kind of is a little opposite of my opinion that I put in the Fantasy Flyer security check roughly 2 weeks ago. Because Jared Goff has found a way, especially last week when he didn't have DeAndre Swift or Amon-Ra St. Brown or DJ Chark, and he managed to keep the Lions within striking distance of the Seahawks as the score climbed into the mid-40s. The execution of Jared Goff has been far beyond what I expected. The interceptions he's thrown, only a couple of them have really been bad. Not even a couple of them. I think one's been bad. Everything else has been Hail Mary style or something that he had to do, that he had to take a chance on, and anybody else would have. So I can't continue to hold that against him. He's improved this Lions team. Jared Goff is my QB5 right now. When we come back, probably week 9 or week 10 into this, he may not be on this list. It depends on how these next games go, especially as he hits the middle of the road. He's got to face the Packers in the next few weeks. He's got to face the Cowboys in the next few weeks. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But if he can continue this pace, he's a good QB to pick up. He's a good QB to have. And that is my top 5 QBs. Ends with Jared Goff. My bottom 5, Russell Wilson. I mean, you gave him $240 million, and he has done nothing that deserves it. Sorry, Russell. It's not been great. Team's 2-3, and they were probably expecting more like 4-1, given the matchups that you've seen so far this year. So I'm not thrilled with Russell Wilson. He's my bottom 1, so he's been the most disappointing. I don't have anything else really to add for it. I'm not putting the Broncos by any means out of a comeback. This team's very stacked, both at the wide receiver, the defensive line. The secondary is a little banged up, but they're still very good. And then, even now with the loss of Javonte Williams, I still think that they can still balance run very successfully. Melvin Gordon stops fumbling. The team can turn this around. Is basically where I'm getting. So my number 2 is Ryan Tannehill. Had a very underwhelming season. Um, Again, another team that can really turn this around. It just depends on how Ryan Tannehill and how effective he can be. I don't think the schedule gets incredibly easier for the next 5 weeks, if I remember looking at it correctly. But he just hasn't been. He hasn't been the Ryan Tannehill that you could depend on to make clutch plays, to move the ball when it needs to be moved. There were several times in the Bills game in week 3, that he had to move the ball, didn't. Um, Last week he didn't. He kind of froze up in the second half. I know the defense from the Colts tightened up a little bit, but Tannehill didn't really change a lot to benefit the team. So I think Ryan Tannehill is my bottom QB2. My bottom QB3 is probably a surprise, and it's 50-50 for me to put him here or at number 5, but I'm putting Aaron Rodgers as my bottom QB3. There was times during these games that Rodgers seems out of sync. They almost lost last week to a New England team with a round 6 rookie quarterback. He threw a pick in the middle of that game. He has had more interceptions, I think, in the first 5 games this year than he did in like the last 10 of last year. The wide receiver core is young. The team is still growing. His leadership seems to have faltered a bit. The off-season drama didn't leak into the season, but I feel like maybe that's causing me to hold him to a standard that I held him to last year, and he's not performing to it in accordance because of some of the things that are happening around the team, and that's fair if that's on me. I just don't see Aaron Rodgers as being the same Aaron Rodgers we had 2019, 2020, 2015. Like he's not the same leader that I would like to see out of Aaron Rodgers. Again, as it is with all of these, they can change. My bottom QB4 is Justin Fields. We saw a flash of him last week. We saw a flash of his successes both on the ground and in the air. The team didn't really benefit on them so much. They didn't capitalize on them. But to put him anything, I was going to put him QB3 until I saw that performance where he started to mix in a little more of the rush and a little more of the pass successes. His QBR, I think, was the highest last week than it was for any week so far this season. So, little hope for Justin Fields there. My bottom QB5 is Matthew Stafford. He was the league leader in interceptions through 3 weeks, excuse me. Did not lead the team the way that I thought he should have, being a returning Super Bowl champion. I know the offensive line has taken some hits. I know he hasn't used some of his tools appropriately, which is squarely, I think, on Matthew Stafford. He really looks uncomfortable throwing to anyone whose name isn't Cup. I mean, like almost like he throws it and cringes almost. Like not really, but you can understand it. So he's my bottom 5. Again, all of these guys can turn this around going forward. The hardest one, I think, is Justin Fields, just because of the tools around him. But all of these quarterbacks could not be in the bottom when we talk about this in Week 9 or Week 10. To the running back, my top 5, Saquon, Chubb, Swift, Sanders. McCaffrey is the only one I think I'm going to talk about. He's my RB5. The top 4, Saquon, Chubb, Swift, Sanders, they are doing everything they need to benefit their teams. They're rushing hard. They're, most importantly, especially in Saquon and Sanders' eyes, they're generally staying healthy. I know Swift has missed now 2 games. He'll be out this week again. But he is still a high-quality running back on an offense that was running the ball very successfully and now has turned back to a little bit more of a pass-centric game. McCaffrey has 2 weeks of very disappointing football for fantasy managers, and then last week, 9 catches, 81 yards, had a touchdown. He ran for 40 or 50 some yards, I believe. He's starting to find that dual threat capability that we've known Christian McCaffrey for. And I think that he can easily continue to move up these these running back rankings. He's in line to be an RB2 or 3 on a fantasy basis by the end of the year, which is where he was drafted. It's where we expected him. And that's despite the Panthers having a very lackluster offense. So there's my top 5 RBs. The bottom 5 running backs, Jonathan Taylor, self-explanatory, just hasn't. He's getting hurt by the offensive line in Indianapolis, but he just has not done it. Number 2 is Najee Harris. Team is starting to fall apart a little around him while they learn. I didn't say fall apart, but they're learning, and he's not having the same outcome that you would have expected as a Najee Harris fantasy owner. Jalen Warren has been very effective, though. It shows you that to a certain extent it's controllable on Najee's part, so he is my number 2. Leonard Fournette is my number 3. I would say for a team that seems to be more focused in the run game, he's been less successful. I don't know if the defense is picking up on the reads for some run game plays from Tom Brady. But Fournette just has not been the same. He still has only 1 touchdown, and it was a receiving touchdown through 4 weeks. So we'll see if that changes. Number 4 is James Conner, who had a fantastic year last year for the Cardinals, came back, looked to be the head back, and has now kind of fallen back into this committee. We see Eno Benjamin, Darrell Williams getting some carries, some pass catching work. Conner has not benefited the way that you would expect him to, and it has kind of hurt the balance of that offense, which I still talk about a run-pass balance for offenses as being crucial until game script provides otherwise. And he just hasn't been there to really help out on a running situation, on situational running anyway. My last one, Joe Mixon. I brought him up earlier, 2.7 yards per carry. Very flat right now. The offensive line gets better. You can definitely see that change. It only takes a few runs of 20, 30, 40, 50 yards, and it changes everything. But for now, I put Mixon in my bottom 5. For the wide receiver, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, household names. Is anyone surprised? No. I don't need to talk much about them. Number 5 is Tyler Lockett, and that's probably a surprise. He has quietly hauled in 80% of his targets. He has picked up several crucial third down catches. He has outshined, other than last week where DK Metcalf went absolute ham sandwich against the Detroit Lions. He's been the wide receiver 1 in Seattle. They have allowed DK to be pressured. It's benefited Tyler Lockett. Geno Smith's completion percentage is definitely helping him, and that's fine. But I am putting Lockett as the wide receiver 5 for me right now. In the bottom, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman, Brandon Cooks, and Treylon Burks. DJ Moore, aforementioned Carolina Panthers, nothing more to really say about it. Jerry Jeudy, aforementioned Russell Wilson, nothing really to say about that. There's only so much you can do when the ball isn't being thrown to you correctly, and there's 2 perfect examples in my opinion. Michael Pittman, a little bit disappointing, likely because Matt Ryan has fumbled 97,000 times, and he's been now the league leader in sacks after last night's game. He isn't having as many opportunities. It's costing that Colts team so many offensive possessions. That O-line needs help. Brandon Cooks, he had a 3-week stretch in there where it was a little disappointing, and that this past week, 7 for 51 and a touchdown has saved him from being probably my number 2 or 3 on this bottom 5 list. A lot of space to grow there for him, and I think if you can continue to grow everybody around him, he becomes better as well. I really want to see Cooks hit that 10 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, at least once or twice this year. My final one is Treylon Burks. Now he's injured, but even when he wasn't, he had 2 games right before he got injured where it just was not lining up for him. Passes, something that you have to take into consideration. I put Tannehill as my bottom 2 for the QB. I have nothing else to really say about Treylon Burks. He has not been able to benefit quite as well as some of the other wide receivers. Experience will probably help that, but he's been a bit of a letdown as far as the wide receivers go, so he is my wide receiver bottom 5. For the tight end, again, the tops, nothing you really got to talk about. Kelsey, Higbee, Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, TJ Hawkinson. They have been out absolutely shining, both in terms of targets, in terms of usage, in terms of success. It's good to especially point out Ertz, who is still in that group. He's just been solid, especially in the red zone, for a target or two per game from Kyler Murray. The bottom, Kyle Pitts, he's not going to improve that this week because he sits, but one red zone target, he's done just nothing. And I don't know if it's his fault. Marcus Mariota's finding other players, so I find it hard to believe it's not partially his fault. But he is the bottom one. Darren Waller, he's the tight end 9 on the year, but I think we all kind of expect Darren Waller to be a tight end top 5. So I'm putting Waller as my bottom 2 because he probably should be, especially in an offense that has enough tools to spread the ball. Robert Tonyan is number 3 in a growing offense, someone who is carried over like Alan Lazard. Lazard has seen so much more success than Robert Tonyan. I'm putting Robert Tonyan as my bottom 3. He just plain old needs to get more usage. I don't know if Rodgers isn't throwing it as much to the tight end, as you'd probably like, but he hasn't been there to grow so much with the team and to provide that leg up in certain situations where you would expect the team to benefit him from doing that. I know he had I believe it was a touchdown last week. He had a couple of good catches, so it was good to see that. But I want to see that continue a little more, and I can remove him from this bottom 5. My last 2 are Dawson Knox and Noah Fant. Noah Fant is in a commission with Will Dissly. Will Dissly has been getting so many red zone targets. It's crazy. Dawson Knox is kind of outshined by Stephon Diggs, so he gets kind of a little bit of a pass there. But he is also not going to be able to improve his position because he is out this week. So those are my bottom 5 tight ends. My top 5 teams, just to end this video appropriately, Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Buccaneers, Ravens. I don't think there's many surprises there. The Buccaneers' record isn't all that rock solid, but most of that can be contributed to injuries, I would say. The rest of these teams, there's no reason they shouldn't be. Bottom 5, the Chicago Bears. I think my opinion on them is pretty clear. They don't look good, and yet I have to point out they're 2-2. They haven't beat really tough teams. Neither has the Broncos, who are in my second team on the bottom 5. After last night's game, that's kind of just how I feel. They lose to good teams, and then they lose to bad teams too. So the Broncos and the Bears have both lost to the Texans. So you can almost take that game off the record, I feel. The Texans, they can surprise some folks, but they're winless. So are they really surprising anyone? And the team they haven't lost to is the team that just beat the Broncos. So, they're 0-3-1. Broncos just lost to the Colts, who are now 2-2-1. So, the Colts are the third team on this list because, like I've pointed out, that offensive line is atrocious. Team number 4 on my bottom 5 teams is the Panthers. If it's not Christian McCaffrey, I don't think your job is safe. I'm just unfortunate. I just have to say that. I don't think Frank Reich's job is safe. I don't think at this pace Nathaniel Hackett's job is safe. The Bears' entire team should not feel safe when it comes to their jobs because this is like season 4 in a row where they've just been disappointing. The 5th team on my bottom 5 is probably a controversial one, but I'm going to take the Washington Commanders, and it is because of their ineffective starts to games. When you're consistently playing from behind, you cannot plan, and you have to be more risk. You have to take more risks. It does not benefit you long term. You can only take so many risks without it not working out. And I don't think that the Commanders have gotten enough starts to not be able to force those risks when they need to, whether it be not running the ball as much, or whether it be throwing the ball to Terry McLaurin less because of this and throwing more safe short passes. There's so many different ways that Carson Wentz can move that offense, and they're limited because they start these games at the bottom of the scoreboard, down by a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, 20 points, 22 points as it was versus Detroit. So the Commanders are my bottom team, number 5. I feel like other than the Commanders, most of these teams will probably be there for the majority of the season. That's just the fact of the matter. Same way with the top 5. I think other than the Buccaneers and maybe the Ravens, I think the Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles will also probably be there most of the season. They're just built in a completely different way. So I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of cut down, stripped down version of the Fantasy Flyer. I flew solo today, and that's okay. Sometimes we got to fly solo. I am going to hopefully pray that Taylor will be back on Tuesday so that we can go through this entire slate. We can kind of have ourselves a little bit of a name game, and we can also go through potentially some waiver wire pickups, some injury and news notes for this time at the Fantasy Flyer and in the Fantasy Pad. My name is Derek.
Adios, goodbye, amigo friends.
That's what I say. Also, special sign out. I'll let Bob Barker take it from here, but I'll see you guys in the next episode of the Fantasy Flyer.
Bob Barker reminding you, help control the pet population. Have your pet spayed or neutered. Goodbye, everybody.